Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad podcast with Chris Finn, a production of P4S Golf. Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. I'm your host, Chris Finn, and I'm excited today to have an instructor on who some of you may know, some of you may not know. If any of you have, I don't know if you guys have heard of a magazine called Golf Digest, but he's one of the top instructors, best teachers in America. So if you do know that magazine, you probably already know. I got my guest with me, Mike Bury. Mike, what's going on, man? Excited to have you on the show.
Likewise, mate. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the chat today.
Likewise. Yeah. So, I guess I always like to, and this is totally selfish on my part, whenever I have an instructor on, particularly, somebody who's kind of climbed the ranks as you have. And, I always like to just hear like the story of how do you get to this point? Like when did you start playing golf? When did you decide you wanted to get into instruction? And, and kind of what's the journey been like for you?
Yeah, I'll try and give you the short version, which is probably, still not that short, but, I started playing, I'm from Australia originally, started playing golf when I was 12. I went away on a little water skiing holiday and they had like a 3-hole golf course. And so after skiing one day, decided to take the little rental clubs from the shop there and just went around the 3 holes. And for someone that had never, kind of played golf before, did okay. Yeah. And, from there, immediately kind of got into golf lessons, got hooked on golf, obviously, right away.
Bit by the bug, as they say.
Yeah. So you started, like many, playing competitive junior golf. Mm-hmm. Really, it became my passion, and eventually turned professional back in Australia. Went through the Australian PGA program, but before that, I was very lucky to be around some of the best coaches in the game, some of the best players in the game, and it was kind of expected that you're a good player, so you go on and play. But, for me, I kind of looked to the guys that I grew up, spending a lot of time with, which were coaches like Dale Lynch and Steve Bann, Dennis McDade, some guys that have been very influential in Australian golf and getting a lot of junior golfers to the PGA Tour. And, these guys were just so cool. I kind of wanted to be like them.
Yep.
And so, I had injury issues and my playing days were always going to come to an end. Mm-hmm. And when I wasn't practicing, I was watching them teach, learning as much as I could. And, eventually my time for playing came to an end. And that's when I dove into a full career as a golf instructor.
That's awesome, man. And, well, I'm sure, injuries, and I'd love to get into kind of the type of injuries you've had. And then obviously it's a physical fitness podcast, so we'll talk about other stuff you probably see with students, but no surprise there. But, as you've gotten into, the instructional side of things, how has that, or has it at all influenced kind of how you look at when somebody comes in to work with you? And, I'm sure you ask them, like anybody, like, what are you looking to do? And, are all your joints original? Or something along those lines. Like how has, if at all, your kind of experience as a player, and obviously some physical stuff that had popped up, how has that influenced how you look at helping the golfers that you work with now?
Yeah, I mean, through my career teaching here in the United States, initially I was very involved in elite player development, junior player development. And that was really my background back in Australia. As kind of my online presence has grown somewhat, I work with a lot of business professionals. And so, working with these types of golfers, they have completely different goals. They have completely different time and resources that they can allocate to it. So, one of the initial conversations that I have with every student is, when we're looking at the swing, we're looking at what the club does and we look at what the body does, and one affects the other. And so, one is just as important as the other, and one is just as influential as the other. And so, understanding how somebody can move gives us a pretty good idea as to why they swing the way that they do.
So like when you have somebody coming in, whether in, maybe in person or remote, maybe do it differently, maybe do it the same. But I think everybody would love to hear kind of if they are the same or different, because I think, it's particularly, we have a large part of what we do is remote as well. And so, I think with COVID and, it was kind of a forcing function for people to jump online and to do things by video. But either way, I'd be curious, and, maybe they're the same, maybe they're different. How do you, as an instructor, like, what matters to you, right? Like if someone tells you like, my hamstrings are tight or my shoulder, like, does that matter? Like what do you tend to look at in terms of, in terms of how do you assess, is it impactful or not? And what do we do from there?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, fortunately here in DFW, we have access to great people. So there's other talented people that are much smarter than me that I can refer people to.
Yep.
But obviously, as the coach, you're generally, you're perhaps a leader of the team with other, really important team members, and so you still have to know what's happening. I kind of have two answers to it, because when you have an elite player come in, obviously, you're kind of putting everything under the microscope, and they're fully committed to the improvement process, and it doesn't really matter what it looks like. They're going to work hard and do everything that it takes. When you have somebody that comes in and they only play golf a couple of times a month, and they get a couple of practice sessions in, it's, well, how do we move the needle as quickly as we can? And that might not be diving into, sort of a full body range of motion assessment. Maybe that'll come. And as we can kind of, convince them a little bit more, hey, the reason why your shoulder rotation is what it is because of a lack of mobility elsewhere. And then after the frustration of them not making the progress that I want to make, all right, I'll buy into it. I need to work on this now.
So you get those guys too, huh?
Yeah.
So I'd love to like take a kind of bifurcate this conversation a little bit. Like let's go down the road of let's start with the business guy, right? Let's start with the guy maybe doesn't have a lot of time or whatnot. And then I want to loop back to the elite player, because those obviously we can get into a lot of detail of other stuff. But when you do have that, that maybe that student who doesn't have, 4 hours every single day, 8 hours, it's not their career, right? It's something they love to do. And, but their time is a constraint. Maybe they travel, whatever it may be, family, whatever. When it does come to, I guess two pieces. Number one, on the physical side, is there like a priority, like one area that like, hey, that's the most important one. If I can only pick one, I want to make sure that is doing X. And then we'll dive into swing too, like kind of how I'd love for you to share kind of how you look at helping people with their swing. But let's start physical first. Is there one area that you kind of like, man, that is a must, or that's the first place I look if I can only look at one?
I mean, if I had to lean in a direction, obviously, because everybody's body is so different. But we see so many people that spend a lot of time sitting, all day. So hip flexors are really tight, glutes are relatively inactive. So we see one of the most common things that I would say that I see, in just somebody's ability to perform a particular movement, not even talking golf swing necessarily here, is, for somebody to be able to, disassociate their lower body from upper body. And we know that obviously plays, a pretty influential role in the golf swing when we see somebody's downswing and everything turns at the same time.
You mean that's not ideal, Mike? I thought that's how everyone was.
Hey, if that's how it's done, there's a lot of people doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. All the guys on tour are doing it wrong. So
yeah, exactly.
So let's staying on kind of this. The guy maybe doesn't have as much time, or the girl doesn't have as much time. From an instructional standpoint, like when somebody comes to you, like, do you kind of have a process or a system that you kind of like to kind of check off, like an evaluation wise? Is it totally goal based? How do you like to approach kind of the instructional side, kind of going away from the physical a little bit and into just how you help people play better golf?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, generally when I get somebody in for first lesson, in my indoor facility, we're equipped with TrackMan. So, it's initially getting some data. After, let's say, kind of the screening questions, really for me, it comes down to, I explain to the golfer that in the swing we have negotiables and non-negotiables. The non-negotiables being the things that the golf ball knows, and what it knows is not much, but what it knows it listens to every time, right? And so, I explain to them that path and face are the non-negotiables. They tell the ball where to start, which way to curve. The ability to control low point is extremely important, and obviously contact. And everybody comes in. One of the initial responses is they're looking for more consistency. Mm-hmm. Obviously, all of those things can be challenging to be consistent with, but one of my explanations is I don't have a cookie cutter approach to teaching. It's not lesson one's a grip lesson, then a stance lesson, then a takeaway lesson. Much like yourself and others, it's how well are we controlling those non-negotiables, what you're doing at impact, and how far do we need to go back in order to make improvements that are going to, affect your ability to control path, face, low point contact.
So, and I'm totally taking a selfish turn here, Mike. Path, face, which one starts the ball? I've heard so many different arguments of the start line, and then if it starts, out as a right-handed player, if it starts right and curves left, it's because your path is out and your face is closed. Other people say it's because the face was up. Which one is it? Just as totally selfish, and hopefully someone listening has the same question.
Yeah, it's certainly what it is now is different to how it was perhaps described many, many years ago. And with access to launch monitors and the launch monitor data, what we know now is that the golf ball starts much closer to the face and curves away from the path.
Interesting. So explain that for me, just for everyone else listening. I'm not that smart, so I'm going to say it's for someone else, but I'm going to use it for me.
So if we take, for example, like, a slicer, right? And let's just say on TrackMan, they have a path of, say, -5, and they have, a face angle that is -1. So, 0 being the target line, face at -1, path is at -5. The ball will start in between the face and the path, but much closer to the face, and will curve away from the path. So, if I'm just kind of making up some numbers here, with that -5 path, -1 face angle, the launch direction is going to be much closer to that sort of -1. It'll be a little more than -1, but it will curve right of the target and perhaps mean something not good.
Got it. and negative, just in case somebody uses like Flight Scope or something else, negative on TrackMan means a left path.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly. Okay. So for a right-handed player, an out to in, or a left path. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, that was totally selfish, but I wanted to make sure I was thinking of that correctly.
I mean, it's important to know from the standpoint of the club face really is the king of the swing. So you can do a lot of things really well, and if your face angle is, your club face control is not good, the ball is going to go in directions you don't want it to go.
Yeah, well, and for me, I think it's an important conversation just with the availability of technology that's coming, right? We see it in the physical space of, there's force plates and 3D, and there's all this stuff you can measure, right? I think the average amateur, I love when I see guys at the range and they got their TrackMan or whatever launch monitor they're using, and you go and ask, and I'll just because I'm like curious, and sometimes I just kind of want to. I guess I'm a little bit of I'm looking for a laugh sometimes, right? And also to help people. But I'm like, hey, what are you looking at there? Right. And they're like, oh, I'm working on, they list like 30 things. And I'm like, oh, okay, so which one are you like, is that good or bad? And just, it's kind of like, in a way, kind of sad how confused they are. They have everything set up. They have the idea of like, hey, I got this tech, but then they really don't have any idea how to use it in a way that's helpful. And
for sure.
And we see it in the fitness space too. And so, I'm always curious to go ask, like, hey, what are you looking at? And every once in a while, I guess somebody like knows what they're doing, and it's a really fun conversation. Otherwise, it's like, hey, I would go talk to the pro, and maybe he can kind of give you some ideas of like what exactly to look for. But do you see similar where people just kind of paralysis by not like way too much information and using it totally wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a combination of things, right? I mean, even if you go back sort of 10 years ago, it's not like every golf instructor had a TrackMan. A few instructors had TrackMan, and now it's very common. The majority of coaches have some kind of launch monitor. and now it's become available to where, there's different types of launch monitors, all different price points and what have you, where the consumer has, quite often a device as well. And, I could buy an MRI machine and I would have no clue how to use it or what anything about it means. And so, anybody that is kind of going down that road, and I think it's a good road to go down. One, you need to know what the numbers mean, and really, it's a tool just like anything else that you need to know its purpose for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It's like using, if you got a hammer, you should probably hammer some nails, not try to screw a screw in.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you need to screw the screw in, get the right tool for the job, but absolutely.
Exactly. So let's go down, we'll back out and go down the other road that I wanted to talk about, because obviously you work with a lot of elite kind of high level players. I think that's of interest for even the amateur, because we all like to know, like, hey, what's the difference? Like, in terms of if I had unlimited time, what are all the things that we could look at, and how does, when you have kind of that player come in who's saying, hey, I want to play on tour, maybe they already play on tour, maybe that is their job, right? Like, how does that, I guess, process or approach, what does that look like, and where are the points that you feel like kind of some of the major differences are with those guys and girls versus the, just the regular amateur who maybe is limited on time?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's gone through a series of, kind of evolution. If I go all the way back to Australia, I was lucky enough to spend time, around the Victorian Institute of Sport program, which essentially is an Olympic training program. And back in the early '90s, they had two guys, Steve Bann and Dale Lynch, created a golf program inside of this VIS. So essentially, they trained golfers the same way they trained Olympic athletes, and I was very fortunate to have access to some of the best in the biz. We're talking names that may not be household names, but names like Vern McMillan and Simon Webb, who were I guess in kind of like an American term would be, sort of head fitness coach of the golf program.
Right.
And golfers that came out of this program were golfers like Robert Allenby, Stuart Appleby, Jeff Ogilvy, Aaron Baddeley. And
they were so decent, right?
Not bad.
They can hit the ball a little bit here and there.
And especially at that point in time, I mean, Aaron Baddeley won the Australian Open, as an 18-year-old, and kind of did it again as a 19-year-old. But this was a collection of really the most elite players from the state of Victoria, who were some of the best in the country and in the world. Yeah. And so that was just kind of the norm in terms of, you worked with a mental coach, you worked with a fitness coach, you worked with your golf coach. And everybody else around you was, really just working as hard as you can work.
Yeah.
And so, coming over to the United States, I worked for Jim McLean when I arrived here, and at the facility we're at here in Texas, we had an incredible gym. We had a fitness team that actually worked with a bunch of PGA Tour players. Jason Day actually lived on one of the holes on the property, so he was practicing there. And so at that point in time, we kind of had everything in-house. We were able to send our athletes over to the fitness team, who were just down the hallway. They would go through an evaluation, and we would consult with the coaches, with the fitness coaches, so that we're all on the same page. And we would do the technical and skill work, and they would, do the fitness work with them. These days with my indoor facility, we focus again very much on sort of the technical skill, mental aspects, and we have, a great network of people that we're able to send people to that, that are committed and do have the time and the desire to really reach the highest level that they possibly can.
That's awesome. And I think one of the coolest things for me, I guess, kind of looping back to the amateur, looking just at your content and just everything that you see kind of online, and there's a cool kind of continuity, I think, of your philosophy. You know, a lot of the stuff that you talk about on your website, for example, is about just there's so much content out there. There's so many ways. It's literally the most confusing. I think golf is the most confusing sport to figure out how to get good at, just because of how much crap there is out there, and you got to sift through it and figure it out. And that's obviously you have your process that you use. You know, it's not cookie cutter; it's customized. How do you, I know you have a ton of online content too. Like if you could talk about just like how have you organized that? How do you help people navigate through that? Because I think for me, it's always really cool when we find somebody in the instructional space who kind of has curated stuff, has kind of come up with a pathway where it's not like Survivor, right? It's like there's actually like a plan. Like it's not survival of the fittest. So hey, we can help you based on wherever you're at. Like if you can talk a little bit about your process and how you go through that. I'd really love to, this again, I'm pretty selfish on the show, just FYI, as a golf nut myself.
No,
so
good.
Like, how do you, how do you talk a little bit about that, and how do you help people kind of figure out what they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, right? It is a challenge for somebody that's out there that's scrolling. You know, what relates to you as the golfer, and what doesn't. What's good and what's conflicting. It is difficult for me when it comes to putting out content. A lot of the content I put online, kind of out there in whether it be YouTube or Instagram, is just generally sound advice, where it's not something extremely specific. And it's not, hey, I think all golfers should swing this particular way, because I don't, that's not my philosophy anyway. But it's from skill training drills that I would consider, okay, it's not going to hurt anybody to do this skill drill. It's going to help pretty much everybody that does it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of with some of the feedback hacks. It's not going to hurt anybody to know that they're striking it in the toe, or in the heel, wherever the case may be. And so, that is one thing that I'm very conscious of, is not putting out information that if it gets into sort of the wrong person's hands, they don't need to hear that advice. Now with the remote coaching programs that I have, that is where we dive kind of into the individual nuances and the information that pertains to that individual's, circumstances. Because it's tricky. I mean, there's a lot of talented golf coaches, and there is an absolute sea of content. And boy, I know if it was something else, if it was like learning some other, highly skilled sport or musical instrument, and I was scrolling and I see like 10 different ways to, make your takeaway or this, that, and the other. How am I ever going to learn this thing? I don't know. The last two videos I watched were completely different.
That is not an uncommon thing that we see. That's my favorite when we'll get guys in here, and they're here for fitness. We don't do instruction, but they'll tell us all about the latest YouTube video they watched and that they're working on, X in their swing. And then they'll be back like literally like 4 weeks later, and they're working on something completely the opposite because they saw that on a YouTube video. And it's like, And so I always joke, 'cause I'm a big fan of, we always say, don't guess, assess. Right. And so I'm like, hey, how do you know that that's what you need? Like, has someone told you that? He goes, no, I saw it and it just makes sense. So I'm going to do it because it works for them.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, that's probably not the path to go down, man.
No. And I get it a lot, in my, my studio here, people will, my students will come in, students that I've been working with for years, and they'll say, hey, I saw this thing, and I'll hear them out and I'll say, well, show me. And, either it's right or it's either right for them or it's not right for them.
Right.
And if it's not from me, and it's from somebody else and it's right for them, I'm stoked. I want to know more about it.
Yeah.
Majority of cases, it's not. And it's still, if we kind of think of things as everything being an experiment, then it was a successful experiment for them. They learned another thing that they don't need to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love and I think that, to me, for everyone listening, when you're looking for a coach or somebody to work with, what Mike just said, check the ego at the door, like, even if it's not yours and it works for you, like, and you have an instructor who supports you, like, I can't tell you enough how important that is to look for in an instructor. And so it's refreshing to hear, Mike. But before we wrap, I think one of the things that I think I want to make sure everybody realizes, you have a lot of it's actually titled free stuff on your page. And basically like things for people to check out. Well, one that caught my eye was how to pick the right golf ball for you. How do you said, I think it looks like there's like a 5-step process, obviously don't tell everyone all 5 steps because I want them to go to your site and grab it. But like, what are like the top 2 things? Like, obviously there's lots of different golf. I know Callaway just came out with a new golf ball. There's, Titleist has the Pro V1, Pro VX, then there's Left Dash. Then there's like, they're talking, everything in golf. There's so many choices. It can be confusing. Yeah. What's kind of, how does a golfer go about choosing a golf ball? And obviously if you guys need to go, we'll make sure we put everything in the show notes, guys, for all you guys listening. So you can go right to Mike's site and get all this stuff. But this is, again, selfish question. Golf ball, how do you choose like which ones to go with? What's the differences between them?
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of different ways. And this particular way is, sort of the non-scientific approach. Obviously, you can test golf balls on a launch monitor. But in terms of just kind of like full game experience, this particular process is working from the green backwards and, starting with, let's say, a handful of balls that you've chosen, kind of read, the information on. Ultimately, if it doesn't feel good off the putter right away, then it's not going to be the ball for you, right? Because feel is sound. And so, the process kind of walks a golfer in this non-technical way. You don't need a launch monitor, working backwards from there, from the green all the way to the tee box through this process of elimination. And, eventually as you go through this process, which is pretty quick, pretty easy, you'll arrive at a ball where you're like, okay, this one, it sounds good. It feels good. I like how much control I have around the green with it. At the same time, it goes the distance that, when I'm weighing up sort of softness, feel, and distance, it checks all of the boxes.
So you mean golfers shouldn't see which ball goes the furthest and just play that one?
Maybe if you're a long drive guy, right?
Yeah. So, I think I'm glad I asked that question, because I have a lot of guys that I play with who they just pick whatever ball goes the furthest. And I think that's important for people to hear. Like, you obviously have way more shots in and around the green, controlling spin, with your chipping and your pitching, and that, anyway, everybody you got to go to grab this from Mike. I think and I love that you did it in a way where people can do it without a launch monitor. That makes it way more accessible for everybody. But, Mike, I want to be respectful of your time, and everybody usually is getting to work around this point in the pod, wherever they're going. But where can people find you? Where's the best places for them to connect with you? Obviously, you do have some, a lot of remote stuff, a lot of content online. What's the best places for them to connect with you and follow you?
Sure, I appreciate it. There's a whole ton of free stuff on my website, mikebury.com. And outside of that, either on YouTube or Instagram are kind of my main hangout places, and it's Mike Bury Golf on either of those platforms.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we put those in the show notes for all you guys listening. And just definitely drive safely. Don't stop and visit those, at least stop on the side of the road if you're going to go grab his stuff. But yeah, no, I think, and just for all of you guys listening, just to, there's not often that there are instructors who have a lot of kind of useful, basically free stuff that are actually kind of, you can assess. And I'm a big fan of that. We have a lot of this on our site on P4S Golf. Particularly we have our home assessment, but Mike's got stuff for short game mastery, how to choose the right golf ball, the wedge guide, putting quiz. So a lot of stuff around the short game, super cool resources. Definitely go check them out. Mike, thank you so much, man. This has been an absolute blast. We kind of got to pepper a lot of different areas. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Mate, I appreciate it. It was great chatting.
All right. And for everyone else listening, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with us on the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. We look forward to catching you on the next episode.